Thank you, everyone, from getting back from your coffee break early. We have our final speaker for today, but definitely not the least speaker. He is a marketing partnership, business development, and product leader in the conversational AI industry, and he's just a generally nice person. I'm so happy to have met him. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at Bespoken, a platform that specializes in ensuring exceptional and flawless conversational customer experiences through AI-driven voice and chat testing, training, and monitoring. Well, he's here to teach us how to optimize an NLP model, design an intuitive and conversational dialogue, and improve the user experience through data, which we all love. So again, last but definitely not least, please hear it for Artie Merritt. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for attending this. I appreciate you taking the time. So I'm Artie Merritt. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Bespoken, and as mentioned, we're a testing platform for conversational AI, IVR, and chatbots. I've been in the space for about 8 years. I just joined Bespoken recently. Prior to that, I was the global lead for conversational AI partnerships at AWS. And before that, I was the founder and CEO of an analytics platform for chatbots and voice assistants, where we processed over 90 billion messages. So I saw quite a bit of data, and some of the best practices that I wanted to share today is based on the data that I saw, as well as some of the customers and how I work with at AWS and other companies. So as we know, conversational AI is used across a wide variety of industries and use cases. Well, customer service is one of the big ones. People are using conversational AI for triaging medical symptoms, booking appointments, just a wide variety of different use cases. And some of the more discrete use cases within inside a chatbot tend to be informational requests, like where's my order? There's data capture, like booking an appointment or signing up for a new account. There's transactional use cases, maybe making a purchase, sending money. And then the last area it gets really interesting. It's around the proactive use cases where folks are monitoring the usage behavior on a website and then proactively popping up to try to help someone when they're getting stuck. I imagine the old Microsoft Clippy, but a lot better than that. One of the interesting trends that I've been seeing is around multimodal interfaces. And when I talk about multimodal, I don't mean the channel shifting or omni-channel. I mean true multimodal that takes full advantage of the device, the voice capabilities, text, typing. For example, imagine if you were to call an airline and you want to change your seat. If they were to say seat 20D is available, well, what does that mean? But if the IVR sent you the seat map at the same time, and you could see the seat and see, oh, that's an aisle seat, I want that, and either click it on the phone or just say to the IVR, yes, I'll take that seat. That's the true multimodal. It's pretty interesting. The other place we've seen advancements is in including additional AI beyond the NLU in these experiences for document recognition, image processing, voice recognition, for example. There's a customer that we work with through one of the partners where it was a chatbot for registering for insurance. And instead of asking people for their name and address, you could just take a photo of your driver's license in the chatbot, and it would extract that information out. You could also take a photo of your existing insurance policy, and it would extract the relevant information to make a new insurance policy. And they found this chatbot experience reduced the sign-up process from multiple days to under 3 minutes. But why are enterprises implementing conversational AI? So folks often talk about reducing costs and increasing containment, but it's really about providing a better customer experience, being available 24/7 on the channels users prefer to interact. So I ran a study, a survey of end users of chatbots to find out what they were interested in and what their experiences have been. And so 90% of consumers would do repeat business with a brand based on having a positive customer experience. And 70% would actually spend more with the brand if they provided exceptional customer service. And the flip side of that is 64% of consumers would stop doing business with the brand after just one bad customer experience. And when you take into account the channels and the different means of interacting, especially internationally, so I'm based in the US, but you see internationally, folks are using WeChat in China, Line in Japan and Taiwan, WhatsApp in Latin America and here in Europe. So being available on the different channels, that was another thing that came out from the study. 84% of the folks wanted to be able to choose their preferred channel of interaction. And at the same time, 73% didn't want to talk to a human at all. They just wanted to be able to do it through the automated solution. But when it comes to building conversational AI, the challenge is that it's all unstructured data. Users can say or send whatever they like. Just thinking about asking for the weather, there's multiple ways to ask for the weather without even using the word weather. Is it hot out? Is it raining? Do I need a jacket? Should I bring an umbrella? So conversational AI is really an iterative process. There's coming up with the use cases, building those NLU models, the conversation designs and flows, the back-end data integrations, all the testing, monitoring, and measurement. It's one big iterative process. So let's chat about some of those different things. So the first is selecting the use cases. So this is often a challenge for folks where to start. And the best place to start is just start simple. Look at the high volume, low complexity tasks. And one way to do that is looking at your existing data. What are customers currently calling into your contact center about? And try to identify those use cases that are those high volume, low complexity tasks. Inevitably, you're going to use NLU as part of this, and just so we're level set on some of the terminology I might use, if we said, what's the weather in San Francisco, that folks would refer to as the raw utterance or the message. The underlying intent there is to check the weather. There's an entity for the location that's, in this case, San Francisco. So this is one of the things that folks have challenges with creating these models. So one of the best places to start is the existing data that you have. And so you can do something called semantic similarity clustering. If folks are familiar with that, you cluster the messages coming in, or the utterances from your users, and you can start to identify the common intents. Like in this case here, these are all people asking for a refund, even though it doesn't always use the word refund. The semantic meaning was still the same. And so this can help you identify those initial intents, as well as the training phrases for the intents. Now, if you don't have existing data, folks sometimes will leverage pre-made models, crowdsourced data, or even the large language models that's all being talked about right now. When it comes to the crowdsourced models or even the pre-made models, you have to be cautious of biases that might be in that data. Like even if you were crowdsourcing from another English-speaking nation, the terms are not always the same. We're all familiar with the chips in the US versus chips in the UK, or different meanings. But this is where like ChatGPT and LLMs can be interesting. Some folks are using that to help with the training phrases. So you come up with the intents, but to build out additional training phrases, you can make use of an LLM for that. So let's chat about creating a great user experience. The first thing is to set expectations. Welcome the user. Let them know what the chatbot can do. If you're in a text-based environment, this is where you could potentially have quick reply buttons, but it's saying, hey, I'm your banking virtual agent. I can help you find an ATM, cancel your credit card, whatever it is, those high volume, low complexity tasks. Even though I mentioned using the quick replies, it's important to still allow people to write or speak in free form. That was another thing that came out of the study. 83% of the folks want to be able to communicate in free form. We are talking about conversational AI, so let them have a conversation. Context and personalization are key. The more information you know about a user, the less questions you have to ask. And you can have a much more streamlined process. If I was to call the airline right now, it's going to ask me if I'm calling about my flight to San Francisco on Friday. It knows who I am and what I'm most likely calling about. And sometimes folks get concerned about PII, and that's something else we found in the study, that about 70% of the users were okay with a chatbot or IVR using existing data that they already knew about the person. Nearly 70% were comfortable supplying new PII to those chatbots and voice assistants. And what brought that down was government-related and educational chatbots. If you take those out, the percentage goes up much higher. It's important to fail gracefully. Inevitably, somebody's going to ask something or ask it in a particular way that the chatbot either doesn't understand or wasn't set up to handle, or the NOU wasn't set up to handle. So it's really important to help get the folks back on the happy path. And think of that same onboarding example. Instead of just saying, I don't know what you're asking me, help guide them through what you can do. And again, you can use some of the quick replies. one thing you might want to consider doing is falling back to a knowledge management system. So if the chatbot's not set up to handle the question, perhaps run that through a knowledge management to see if there's possible articles that come up. So we had a customer that did this, and they would share, here's 3 articles that might help you. And they had analytics on all the links to see if people click them. And they would ask, was that helpful or not? And they would look at this data to then go back and update the experience. Maybe they would add an intent around that. This is another case where LLMs can be useful. It's for expanding the possible matches when a fallback occurs. So somebody says something that doesn't trigger an intent, use a LLM to expand those to other possibilities and see if those match an intent. So that's built into this handful of platforms that built that type of functionality. So in this case, like someone saying, I want my money back, it doesn't understand that, but it matches something closer to, I want a refund, which does trigger the refund intent. It's important, though, to provide a means to escalate. You could optimize for 100% containment by just never escalating the customer, but that would be a horrible customer experience. And as I mentioned, part of the reason folks are doing this is to provide a better customer experience. So if you don't have live agents to escalate to, consider escalating to a trouble ticketing system or even an email support so you can still get back to the folks. Chatbots and voice assistants provide a great opportunity to reinforce your brand. This is something to be careful with, though. One thing I found in the analytics is the chatbots that had some form of personality did have higher engagement, but you can overdo it a bit. So this is why you sometimes hear folks employing former screenwriters and all that have know that timing. So if you do employ a personality, it's helpful to keep a guide so you maintain the consistency. The other thing to ensure is that your conversations are inclusive, accessible, and empathetic. You want to build trust with the customers or the users of your chatbots. It's all about the power of words, using clear, succinct, unambiguous language, and then keeping in mind the context of the user, that especially in a customer service situation, they might already be coming in upset, so keep that in mind and be empathetic. And lastly, on the design, one thing you might want to consider is asking people for feedback in the conversation itself. The great part about conversational interfaces is users not only tell you what they want, they tell you what they think about that after. Sometimes it's not very pleasant, but it's really helpful. So why not just ask them, what did they think of that response? If you do ask them, you look at the analytics so you can incorporate that in. I'll just briefly touch upon data integrations, because this could go on for a long time. Especially in the customer service space, the chatbot or IVR is going to connect to all sorts of different backend systems, whether it's your CRM solution, knowledge management, contact center. One of the challenges right now with enterprises is often that data is siloed, and so an experience in a digital channel versus IVR, it's different. So it's really helpful to come up with like that single source of truth and make that data more accessible and accurate, so it's a consistent experience. And then you have to keep in mind any of the data compliance issues like GDPR here, or back in California, there's something similar called CCPA. So let's chat a little bit about testing, monitoring, and measuring. So prior to launch, you can test your experience. So some folks do this manually. You can actually look at the visual flows. If you're using a tool, say like VoiceFlow, you can see the mappings of these flows. Sometimes in a voice experience, you might have someone act out the voice assistant, and you speak to it. Does this make sense? You can use automated testing tools. There's providers out there. The company I'm working for is one of those testing tools. You can actually test the models themselves. So that semantic similarity cluster I was talking about, if you apply that to the model, you can see where there's potential collisions or overlaps on training phrases and intents and fix those before you even launch. But once you do launch, this is one of the more important things to look at, the mishandled and unhandled intents, to see where that NLU might be breaking down. So again, applying that semantic clustering across the messages, regardless of intent, can help identify that. So in this case, what we're seeing here is these are all messages that cluster into checking the order status. In some cases, it goes to the proper intent. In other cases, it hits the fallback, I don't know. And yeah, in others, it's hitting a completely unrelated intent. So you can use this information, like the fallback one. Perhaps that message would be a great candidate as a training phrase for the intent. If you had a whole cluster hitting a fallback, that might be a candidate for a whole new intent. And then the ones that are getting mishandled, that's where you can maybe tweak the training phrase a bit so it better matches up. It's also helpful just to understand the underlying themes, like why are people reaching out. I was always surprised when I was at AWS evaluating potential partners, folks that were doing analytics, especially in the call center, they were focused so much on the numeric metrics. And if you ask, like, can you show why are people calling, that was a key missing feature. But if you do that clustering and see why people are reaching out, why are they calling, there might be an underlying issue with your product or service to fix. The other thing to look at is the least used intents too. It's not just the top ones, but the least used. I had one customer where they had all these intents that were never getting triggered, and they saw that in the analytics. And what they end up doing is realizing that those intents were quite complex. They were looking for all sorts of, like, multiple entities associated with it, and they just simplified the intent, and then those areas of their chatbot started getting accessed. Transcripts provide a wealth of information. It really gives you that context of what occurred, especially if there was escalation or sentiment went negative. You can go in and see what occurred. For the analytics platform I had, this was the top thing. People were pouring through the transcripts. They were looking through to see what actually happened. So it's also important to measure customer success. As you mentioned, we're building these solutions that help improve customer satisfaction. So what impact are we having? There's multiple ways to measure it. You can measure the sentiment analysis or the change in sentiment analysis over time, because maybe someone comes in upset already. If you are prompting users, like I was showing earlier, that can be a form of a CSAT. Like, you can look at that data, how are people responding, and again, like update your solution from that. And lastly, on the analytics, we're building these solutions for a goal. Whether that is containment, reducing escalations, getting jobs done, signing up for an account, triaging a medical symptom, whatever it is. So it's really important to see the path, see where the drop-off and abandonment occurs, and go back in and fix those things. And as I mentioned, this is an iterative process. So whatever you get back from the data, from the analytics, you can feed back into your models. It goes back into the flows, any of the integrations, and it's just a continuous process here. So that's it for me. You can find me on LinkedIn or Medium, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them here or afterwards. Thanks.
We have time for some questions, if anyone would like to raise their hand.
Hey, you mentioned testing platforms for conversational AI. What does that look like? I mean, I come from the contact center space where we would really easily test DTMF, but what does that look like for testing a conversation?
Yeah, so there's multiple different types of testing you can do. So you can do functional testing on the actual, so you call it into IVR or IVA, so a more intelligent version that allows conversation. So you can simulate a call, use a text-to-speech engine to actually speak to the IVR and see the response coming back. Did that match what you expected? You can also test the NLU behind it. Then there's load testing. So once you do that, the functional testing, you can turn over to monitoring. So set up that test to keep running however often you like. But you can do load testing too to see how does your contact center handle load and the overflow to different regions if you have a multiple region contact center. But yeah, the big piece is the functional testing to actually speak to the voice IVR, or if it's a text-based chatbot, simulate the interactions with the text-based chatbot. Oh, yeah. So Bespoken is the company I work for that does that, and we have a gentleman here from Sierra, they do it as well, so yeah.
And that dynamically changes as the flows change?
Yeah, so it depends how you create the test, but yeah, you can set them up to be more dynamic and look for, almost like have wildcards in the conversation depending on how the IVR is supposed to respond.
Hi there. Everybody knows you need, well, most people know that you've got to feed and care for your bot afterwards. Got to train it afterwards with production data. However, the reality we're seeing is that no one wants to put the effort in of going through thousands of customer logs. First of all, is that what you're seeing? And secondly, is there anything that you're seeing that novel ways or smart ways of getting around that problem of the whole care and feeding the effort goes into it?
Yeah, so that's what we're saying. Building and maintaining the model is one of the more challenging aspects. So one of the things you can do to start is mention the semantic clustering of existing data you have to your contact center. But if you look at the analytics to look at those mishandled and unhandled intents, that'll help identify things to fix. When I had the analytics platform, what a lot of folks were doing is they have spreadsheets, and people would say like, oh, did this go where I wanted it to? And they're sitting there manually doing that. So we created tools to make that easier to quickly identify it. And I have a website out there called PyRobot that does this. You can just upload stuff and it will show you where it's breaking down and help you fix those things to make it a little bit easier.
Thank you.
First of all, thanks a lot for the excellent presentation and information. Well, the majority of our customers, they use to the legacy way of requesting service, which is basically through email and calling the help desk. So we are in the process of adapting the chatbot and specifically email bots.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice to manage the cultural change, and what are the KPIs that we need to look after?
Oh, the email one's interesting because it's such a big
Yeah.
chunk of text. In general, with the customer service, folks are trying to reduce the load on the agent. So looking at those high volume things that you could potentially handle with email would be a good place to start. One of the customers for Bespoken, they're true omni-channel. They do email support and call center, chatbot, WhatsApp, the whole works. And it's interesting to try to, and the agents actually, it's not like different agents for each one. The agents actually handle all the channels.
Oh, okay.
So the testing becomes quite challenging to do that, especially when you're simulating load to an agent. But yeah, I definitely hook up some form of analytics to it to see how people are interacting so you can improve.
So how can we increase the chances of letting people adapt the new changes and manage that cultural change? So is it, for example, a kind of showing the business values, or what would be the recommendation in this case?
Oh, to get adoption of this?
Yes. We're going to just start it. We're going to just roll it out.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. I used to have a slide on the adoption part. What some folks are doing to help drive adoption, at least of the text-based chatbot, they'll have it on the support page. And if you do, you want to give reasons or incentives to use that, like, because people are quick to pick up a phone if it's there. But if you say, hey, use the text-based chatbot, that's going to be faster, it's available 24/7, like that kind of thing. So I did a panel where we had someone from IBM was one of the panelists, and he said they built an internal chatbot for tech support. And what they would say to get people to use it is, why not the agent, your tech support agent, is going to use the chatbot themselves. So why not use the chatbot first? Because he's just going to use it anyways. And one thing that came out from the study that it ran is people, at least the respondents, said they prefer text-based channels. And a lot of folks start with voice. And so that's kind of interesting. If more people want text, why not start with text? And when I was chatting with someone about this, they made a good point. Because with voice, you can force the person in. Like they're calling the number, you can force them in. It's hard to, you can't necessarily force someone to go to the email route when you have all those other options. But I think if you highlight the reason or benefits of doing that, the quicker response, available 24/7, those kind of things, that could help.
And about the KPIs that we need to monitor? Any specific?
Oh yeah, chat it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, it depends again on the goals. So if yours is more around the escalations containment, that's one. How's the actual responses working? So the effectiveness of the response. This was saying like the mishandled, unhandled intents, those kind of things. Yeah. But happy to chat after. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I love winding down with a calm and collected presentation at the end of the day, so thank you very much, Artie, for this. This was the last speaker for today in the O's on stage. Mike and I will be doing some closing remarks before we send you off on your merry way, maybe to the VUX party, maybe not. Come see us downstairs so you know what the plan is for either tonight or tomorrow, and thank you for today.